Welcome to Power Politics. I'm Jeronimo Cortina, where we prepare you for your next political conversation.
And I'm Brandon Rottinghaus, a political science professor here at the University of Houston. A contrastive week. We've got the U.S. Senate debate, which was pretty fiery.
Yep.
We've got Trump and Harris who are campaigning. Donald Trump had an impromptu DJ session.
Yeah.
We've got lots of things happening up and down the ballot. We're going to talk about a bunch of stuff this week, including races to watch across the state. But let's first dig into kind of the biggest story of the week, and that's the debate between Colin Allred, the representative from Dallas area, and incumbent U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. They had one debate for 1 hour, and it was like a house of fire, like an amazing, like just a, aggressive moment for both men, actually. Cruz definitely on the attack, as he's wont to do. We saw Allred, who normally is very kind of reserved in these debates, really get tested and challenged.
Yeah.
And he definitely kind of held the line, like the linebacker he is, right?
Yeah.
So tell me what you thought about this, winners and losers.
Well, I don't know who's the winner and who's the loser. I think both of them were at it.
Yeah, okay.
Both of them were very aggressive. Yeah. I mean, Allred started the debate, just going after him, saying Cancun
right away, like
11,000
sentences.
Like, when you're not here, you're in Cancun, so on and so forth. You had 12 years, you haven't done anything. And then Senator Cruz replied back, you are have always voted with Nancy Pelosi. I question if anyone remembers Nancy Pelosi right now. So exactly. So
is she from Texas? I don't remember. Yeah.
No, she's from California.
Oh, indeed. Yeah. Oh, that's even worse.
Yeah.
For Ted Cruz, that's the worst thing, right? But you're totally right. Like Ted Cruz spent a lot of time basically tying Harris to Allred,
right,
and like expressly using those words. Talked a lot about Nancy Pelosi and how their voting is lockstep. Talked a lot about how we have to keep Texas. Really elevating the stakes, especially for Republicans, right? And you and I have talked about this a bunch before. Cruz needs Republicans to come out in big numbers,
right,
and that's really the recipe for how to win in Texas. It might not be that way forever, but it will be that way this cycle. So, do you think that Cruz made that happen with the sort of inflammatory notion of like talking about transgender athletes in sports, talking about
Correct,
the kind of extremism on abortion that he says Allred is, talking about the border and border security issues?
Well, I think it's a tricky, very calculated risk, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, to elevate the stakes for only Republicans.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the reason behind that is that we have 2.5, more or less, give and take, new million voters. Yeah. If that, we don't know a lot about them.
Yeah.
We don't know how much they're going to be turning out. We don't know how much they are enthusiastically going to participate in the election. Cruz needs his base, 1,000%, but also needs a little bit more.
Yeah.
Depending on the mix of who's going to go out and vote, that's going to determine who's going to win this election.
Yeah.
I mean, both presidential in other states, but also here in the U.S. Senate race is going to be extremely important. So I don't know. I didn't feel that he was talking to, the middle ground.
Yeah.
Or to undecided voters that, again, we don't know who they are.
Yeah.
But how you're going to throw all the red meat for a very particular part of the electorate and forget about the other one, I don't know. It's very risky in my opinion.
I had the meat sweats at the end of it. There was so much red meat. It was like barbecue fest,
right?
Right? Like talking about Donald Trump, talking about Harris and Pelosi, defund the police, killing oil and gas jobs, right? Talking about how the left is angry. Right. Like he threw all of that red meat. And I think though, I mean, to your point, I think it's a good strategy. I think that's the winning strategy. There aren't enough people in the middle who are likely to be persuaded by this to make the difference. If you look at the polling, basically most people have already made up their minds. There aren't a lot of people who are sort of saying that they're really not sure. And I don't know how clearly reflecting that is of people because, polling is a little bit wonky, especially in a presidential election. We've seen this last couple cycles. But for sure it's the case that Cruz needs to communicate to Republicans. They've long left persuasion. That's not what this debate was about. This debate was about mobilization. And I think that Cruz basically did that. And the way we know this is that he spent a lot of time talking about Donald Trump, right? Who he's actually underperforming in Texas. So what he needs is two things: Republicans turn out in big numbers, and for his numbers to basically be on par with Trump.
Yeah, but again, you are preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
So,
But they're the ones who are going to sing the loudest.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. But the question is, they already going to go out
Yeah.
and vote for you.
They probably didn't need this to make that happen.
Yeah. So my question is like, we're
Yeah.
there. Like, you don't have to talk to us because
Yeah.
we're already
We're coming
gonna,
in anyway.
deliver, because they have delivered in the past elections consistently, and for Trump and also for Cruz. So my question to you is, did he waste last night's debate and trying to bring other people that might be, still Republicans and on the fence and whether Allred or not, and say,
Right.
just have a little bit of
Yeah.
I don't
Like talking to people who are in the middle who might be persuaded. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, but like I also think that like for Allred that he needed to kind of contain the damage, because Cruz is just this all-encompassing debater. There's no question he's a better debater, right? This is not a debate contest per se. It's about politics, about communication. And one of the things we know from scholarship on this is that people don't always watch these debates, but they will hear tell of it after, right?
Yeah.
And so like the discussion through headlines and through quotes and stuff are also useful in terms of kind of making that message. And I think that Allred did a good job at that, basically being more quotable. And I think those are lines are going to kind of be the ones that really flow through. The ones that Cruz provided, like keeping Texas, like you say, definitely appeal to the base, but I'm not sure it's the sort of thing that really is going to attract like the kind of moderate voter who, is a, sort of, working in the suburbs, sort of raising family, like thinking about kind of how they're going to vote. I don't think that's necessarily a sellable issue, but they think it is, right? Clearly, the way he's talking about it, they think that it is. But if you look at the issues they talk about, right, like how the kind of elevation of the stakes from Cruz about the kind of transgender sports issue or about the abortion issue and saying that Allred's too extreme, talking about the border and about how this is becoming like a problem and also contributes to kind of economic problems. Like there are people out there who I think look at this and say, yeah, like the Democratic Party's gone too far. Allred is with them. I'm going to vote for Cruz, or maybe not at all, and which is not good for Cruz. But I think that the category of people who maybe sort of believe that Allred's too extreme might be that type. So I don't know how it's going to play out, right? And the other issue is that without straight ticket voting, people aren't just going to be lockstep Republican, right? Like you can go and kind of pick and choose. I think that's what Ted Cruz is worried about. Number one, people either go in and vote for Trump and nobody else, or they'll go in and sort of cherry pick, right? Well, I like Trump because, he's sort of outlandish and I like this sort of style. I don't like what Biden did, but Ted Cruz, I don't really like him, and Allred seems like a good enough person. So like that kind of voting structure,
and
that
I think,
Trump Allred voters are kind of a unique bird, but may switch the difference.
And I think that getting away with those straight ticket voting in the last years, now is going to come back and bite Republicans.
It's going to come back to bite them. The other thing is that if you look at the polling, Republicans are more excited to vote than Democrats. 82% of Republicans say they're excited versus 79% of Democrats. It's a small difference, right? But a meaningful difference when it comes to turnout, right? We've talked about this before, but basically the turnout in these rural areas is higher than it is in the urban areas. And if you just sort of think about geography as politics, then Republicans are getting better turnout. So like they don't want to be in a position where they're having to encourage people to come out in these counties, which otherwise they might do. So it's interesting to see big moments in the debate. What do you think was like the kind of more sort of impactful moment that might be the one that people remember?
Well, I think, the one about January 6th was like very impactful.
Yeah.
The things that Allred said to Cruz were pretty tough.
He looked mad.
Oh, he was very
I
mad.
would make him mad. He's a large human, and he played a little NFL football. Like,
yeah, no, he was mad.
Definitely rammed through you. But like, I definitely thought that was a pretty powerful moment.
That was pretty powerful. Obviously, when they were discussing immigration and abortion, was also very emotional for both parties attending the debate.
Yeah, indeed.
So
Interesting. I mean, do you think these are sellable issues for people that they're watching this and they're going to say, like, this is something that, we're going to vote on and it's going to be the difference maker for them, that they
No.
learn something that they didn't already know from this debate?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that most people, as you know, have a stance on immigration. Most people have a stance on abortion. The issues become very complicated. These issues were not discussed. What was that? An hour of a debate? I mean, it's
Which,
impossible.
As somebody who is like a constant consumer of politics, I was happy to have an hour of this debate.
Sure,
not
sure,
the 2
sure,
hours
sure.
that usually have. But it did feel like it went by fast, and like the 30-second, 60-second, 90-second kind of, back and forth just doesn't get to the really complicated features of this, which, of course, again, just makes this a kind of talking contest. But I think that for Allred, his biggest concern is that you've got a lot of people who simply aren't voting. If you look at the polling, basically, of the people who did not vote in 2022, which was a lot of Democrats especially, 51% are Allred supporters. So he needs non-voters to vote. That's really hard to do. And the question is, did this make that happen? I'm not sure. He reminded people about January 6th and Ted Cruz. Or he reminded people about Cancun. He reminded people that Cruz is a bomb thrower, not a diplomat, basically, in the Senate. People don't remember, right? It's been too long. And as you said, there's a lot of new voters who maybe aren't attentive to these issues.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much that strategy kind of moved the needle when really what Allred needs is just mobilization.
Correct.
That said, he's going to spend like millions of dollars on ads to get people to come out to vote.
Yeah.
So as you know, having watched TV in the last 3 weeks, there's just a ton of these ads. This is going to be a historic race. We're talking about spending topping about $120 million. That's going to be significant. That's going to be probably outpacing every other state. So the problem, though, is that people are not convinced that that's going to be enough. Ted Cruz, in particular, this week is complaining that the Republicans weren't giving him enough support. They're getting support to places like Florida and Montana and even Arizona. Is Ted Cruz being left behind by national Republicans?
Well, maybe. And on the other hand, you have Allred getting support from, national Democrats.
Yeah.
So I think the Republican Party sees Ted Cruz as a safe seat in the sense that you don't need help.
Yeah.
You're fine.
Just, take a breath.
Don't worry. You're going to be okay.
He seems really nervous about this, though.
He seems very nervous, and probably he knows something. I mean, the polls, as you say, they're wonky, and some of them have, him winning by 2 points, 5, 3, etc., etc.
Yeah.
That's very close.
Too close for comfort.
You don't want to be less than 3 weeks starting the election in a position where you don't have a double-digit advantage.
That's true.
So,
and I will say that the times where there has been this kind of dramatic party shift, so in 1961 when John Tower, a Republican, takes the Senate seat for Democrats that held since Reconstruction, in 1978 when Bill Clements wins the governorship, it's always been because the incumbent party wasn't paying attention. So if it's going to happen, this would be kind of that set of criteria. But I think
this moment of history has been brought to you by Brandon.
Exactly. Yeah. This moment in history, right?
Right.
I think that condition is there, but again, it's going to take a lot of these factors to kind of fall into place, and that's always the concern. But to me, it's interesting that Ted Cruz is now asking for money from these national Republicans. He complained specifically about Mitch McConnell, who's got like a $400 million war chest and hasn't given him a dime. Well, I guess that's what happens when you call someone a liar.
Yeah.
You're kind of de facto boss. Like years ago when Cruz said that McConnell was a liar, I guess that the chickens come home to roost. Maybe this is karma screaming very loudly, but he needs that money, and if he doesn't get it, it could be a problem for him. So
absolutely,
we'll see that play out as it is, and we'll keep talking about this as it comes. But one thing that happened this week that was interesting as well is at the very top of the ticket, and that's that Donald Trump turned DJ for a good portion of this rally in Pennsylvania. He held effectively an impromptu concert. This is the strangest thing. You have to go and look at this. But basically, the town hall had devolved into a kind of just music concert, and there were some disruptions in the crowd. Some people had medical issues which they were able to kind of quickly get through, but former President Trump decided to kind of just end it and say, let's just listen to some music.
Yeah.
It's not the exact quote, but it's pretty close to it. And literally, as the Washington Post reports, for about 39 minutes they just all listen to music, and Trump kind of sways and dances a little bit. What's going on? What do you take from this?
I watched the whole thing.
You watched all of it?
Oh, yeah, the whole thing.
You're just a huge Abba fan, or Sinead O'Connor. He played Nothing Compares to You, and he played James Brown. It's a Man's World. What is going
Luciano Pavarotti to Sinead O'Connor, right?
Sinead O'Connor.
And it was, wait, what?
Yeah.
And
what is happening?
it was very odd,
Yeah.
to say the least. It was Christie Noem, the South Dakota governor, just applauding. When you look at the images of, there's two young guys in the audience, they don't know what to do.
What do we do?
And I think that caught us by surprise. It seems that, former President Trump said, like,
Yeah.
why?
He was like, why more questions?
Yeah.
Well, to your
Who
point
wants
earlier,
to hear more questions? So let's play some music.
Yay. No, you're right. Like, and I think, as you say, kind of this is the choir, right? Like, they are the committed. It's a cult of personality, and he could do anything in this rally, and they would love it. And they did, right? I mean, I don't know, you could quantify this, but people liked it. They stayed. And so that's interesting to me. But the question is, to me, and the reason I bring it up is that there are concerns about the former president's mental status. The same kind of conversation we had about Joe Biden and his kind of behavior is certainly applicable to the way that the kind of former president is acting. In fact, Vice President Harris took a swipe at him for this, basically asking, is he okay? Which is both kind and rude at the same time, right? So I don't know how to sort of position this and think about this because it's not something necessarily that's like quantifiable in our kind of ability. But the former president is refusing to release some medical records that the vice president is doing, and she's using that as a political tool against him. Do you think this is going to be a problem for him? Like, are there moderate Republicans out there or leaning independents out there who look at this kind of behavior and say, this seems strange to me? Like, do we want this in our commander-in-chief in the Oval Office?
Oh, absolutely not. And the same thing has to apply. The same thing that was applied to Biden has to apply in this case.
Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, you don't want Biden, if he would have been reelected, falling asleep on, whatever meeting. And you don't want Trump, if he wins, in a meeting saying, enough of this stuff, let's hear some music.
Right. We're trying to brief you on the situation in Iran. And like, instead, why don't we just, put on some Merle Haggard
and see where we go with these nice, relaxing music. So I think it's both are fair questions.
Yeah.
And I think that, it's something that people, eventually will have to decide at the voting booth.
Yeah, as this all comes out, because there's not going to be another debate. It's really going to just be kind of mobilization through ads and through the ground game, which is really important. And obviously that's going to be a big factor. And in Texas, too, where there's still a lot of politics to be had. We'll talk about races to watch in just a minute. But there's also some interesting developments that are happening with statewide elected officials. This week, Texas Agricultural Commissioner Sid Miller was subpoenaed to testify in a criminal trial to one of his former political consultants. This aide had been indicted on felony charges of theft and commercial bribery. Basically, he's been accused of taking money in exchange for offering hemp licenses that are issued by the Agricultural Commissioner's office. There's a history here of the two intermingling. The relationship is pretty close. The Austin American-Statesman reported that basically Smith had promised a business person access to the Agricultural Commissioner, Sid Miller. Miller gave Smith's wife a position in 2016. So there's no indication that Miller did anything wrong, but there's certainly, the fact that he's testifying here means that he's connected to this. My question is this going to matter? Like, do you think this controversy is going to have a tangible effect on Republicans, but also specifically on Sid Miller?
I don't think so. And you are the scandal expert.
So I brought it up so you
no. So I know that you're asking me that question so I can pivot and say, well, you're the scandal expert. Have a say.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. I think that, Sid Miller has done very outrageous things in the past. We had that, what was that? The Jesus shot.
The Jesus shot, which seems all the more, as one ages, like if you had a miracle shot, you'd take it.
Oh, absolutely.
But
100%.
he went to like a rodeo on state funds, which he eventually paid back. Yeah, got the Jesus shot to basically cure all the maladies.
So, it's not gonna really matter in terms of what happens. I mean, it could matter if the investigation or if someone knows something, and this is just one way of, open another avenue to that. And that would be important because when you're subpoenaed to testify in a criminal trial, it's everything that you say as people say,
Yes.
can and will be used against you.
All of a sudden, it's a Law and Order episode, like,
Yeah.
which is okay too. It's a very popular show.
Right. And you have to tell the truth
Yeah.
when you are testifying under oath.
Yeah, you have to
so
be
that's
very cautious.
extremely dangerous.
That's a really good point, actually. And these ties do suggest some potential like connections that maybe they're trying to tease out. It reminds me of the 1990s, as almost everything does, because great things happened in the 90s.
Sure.
Jeronimo, as you remember, I mean, even Trump is like, playing on Sinead O'Connor. So like 90s are back, my friend. But this happened to Jim Hightower. Part of the reason he lost the race for ag commissioner and Rick Perry won was that there were these scandals inside the ag commissioner's office, and 3 of his aides end up going to prison. He wasn't involved, but the scandal kind of tainted him. So, but this is in a day when scandals matter. And I think you're right that they don't matter as much anymore. And so I think this problem is definitely something that he's going to have to grapple with. But realistically, it's probably just a question of then kind of how good of an opponent you're going to get, right? We know that like if you're kind of scandal ridden, you're going to get a better opponent. And so as a result, I think that probably that's going to happen. And I might hurt him a little bit, but that's in 2026, which is like an eternity away, right? I can't even write the word. It's so far. That's far enough that probably won't make a huge difference, but we shall see. But let's talk about Texas, and let's talk about legal issues around voting. Obviously, the state, and we've talked about this a bunch, has spent a lot of time revamping its voter laws. Senate Bill 1, SB 1, is really the kind of cornerstone of a lot of these sweeping changes. This week, though, U.S. District Court Judge Xavier Rodriguez basically struck down another part of this law that did a couple of things. One is that the requirement basically for anyone to assist a voter had to sign an oath under penalty of perjury. And they also blocked a provision that restricted voter assistance on door-to-door outreach. Now, he's chipped away at this over the course of the last couple of years, including mail ballot issues and door-to-door canvassing for ballot initiatives. So they've kind of eventually chipped away at this. We're still litigating voting issues from 2021. Is this going to have an effect on what happens in terms of voting in the next election?
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, because the main provisions here is that this has chilled out voter outreach. So given that now it's unchilled or unfrozen or less cold, let's put it that way.
I think Unchilled is a good podcast name. We should consider a name change.
Yeah. Unchilled.
Unchilled.
I think that allows, especially these big campaigns, both for Republicans and Democrats to go all for it. And I guess that is going to have implications. And the real implications here was about, voting rights. If you are a person with a disability, or if you have limited English proficiency or literacy issues, et cetera, then you can assist them. But then you would have to sign these affidavit, and then that could imply releasing health information that is protected by law. So a bunch of other legal questions. Right. So I think, it's good.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and we know that like these changes have made material differences in terms of how people vote. A lot of people have decided not to vote by mail, especially Republicans. If you look at that distribution, you see a lot fewer people are going to vote by mail who are Republican than they used to. So that's another kind of issue where you're going to see this kind of discussion about how people vote as, related to the legal rights and SB 1. So we'll see how that plays out. But let's talk about some races to watch, because there are several. Although the districts have been pretty well gerrymandered, so we don't see a lot of competition, there are a couple we want to highlight. And so one is a Senate race in the Valley, Senate District 27.
Correct.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's very interesting because Senator Lamantia has put a lot of money.
Like $10 million of her family's money?
Yep. $10 million bucks to make it competitive. Yeah. And it's a very interesting race. It's the definition, and it's on the one hand, when you're thinking about the ballot and when you're thinking about, the border, it's very interesting to see because the city Democrat or the urban Democrat is not the same as the Democrat that you would expect in the RGB. Yeah. RGB Democrats tend to be a little bit more, let's put it this way, conservative, not as conservative as Republicans.
Border Democrats.
Border Democrats. There you go. So I think that makes it a very interesting race in the sense of where the Democratic Party might go and also where the Republican Party might go.
Interesting.
When you look at border Republicans,
Mm-hmm.
they tend to be, on the one hand, sometimes moderate,
Yeah.
but then there's no space in between, and then they jump to, real Trump supporters,
Yeah.
MAGA movement
Build the
supporters.
wall and
exactly.
deportation. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, and geography is important in this too. And I think you're right that this is a race that's to watch because it does dictate the way Texas is changing. It's becoming more urban, and that's where Democrats are.
Yep.
And the rural areas are where Republicans are. So the counties like Nueces County, San Patricio, Kennedy counties are all rural and trending red the last couple cycles.
Yes.
So that to me is going to be really interesting. Presidential turnout's going to really help, I think, in this. But the problem is that if Harris tanks with Latino voters, it's going to be really hard for them to win the seat. So I think that, again, you're seeing that play out here. Former Representative Lucio endorsed Senator LaMantia, but his father, former Senator Lucio, it gets confusing, endorsed the Republican opponent, Adam Hinojosa. Again, reflecting the fact that there's just a lot of ideological kind of crisscross here that may be useful. But speaking of ideological crisscross, the last thing to talk about is that we are obviously in football season, and tailgating is a big factor here. This week, Governor Gregg Abbott and Governor Brian Kemp of Georgia are going to meet up. It's going to be basically in advance of the UT Georgia game. I'm sure we've got people on both sides of that who are looking to see. It's a charged affair, if you know what I'm saying, but it's political because none other than Dade Phelan, who is the embattled Speaker of the Texas House and a putative opponent of Gregg Abbott, is going to be there too. How does this play out politically?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, just to see what's going to happen in that game, and obviously Kemp versus Abbott in football terms, is going to be very interesting.
Very
to
interesting,
see.
yeah.
We'll see.
Hey, it's good we can all come together because, let's face it, we can all agree that we should be Georgia, period.
Absolutely,
No matter how you fall
100%. But we're going to have those news for next week. I'm Jeronimo Cortina.
I'm Brandon Rottinghaus. The conversation keeps up next week.